ate more healthy foods, and you checked on me every once in a while. Is that too much to ask? I don't want to leave, but unless you stop ignoring me, what else am I supposed to do? Remember, when I quit, you quit. Sincerely, your heart.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you. Doing the minimum to control your high blood pressure isn't doing enough. High blood pressure can lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get your blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late. Find out how at heart.org/blood pressure. Check, change, control. A message from the American Heart Association, the American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
Talk 1470 is WWNN Pompano Beach and 95.3 FM W237BD Boca Raton, the Health and Wealth Radio Network.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening. It's Monday night. Time for Sex Talk. My name is Dr. Richard Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. Great to be back.
Good to see you,
Another
as always.
Monday night.
My brother, my droog, my best pal.
All right, back at you.
Here to talk about sex.
Mm-hmm. Sex.
And the issues of the day.
Scully's issues of the day.
What's happening sexually in our world?
Mm-hmm. You know what? I think we can always say there's a lot going on.
There's always something going on.
And unfortunately, it's not always good. I would love it if we were just so totally focused and immersed in pleasure when it comes to sex, but it hits so many cylinders.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it comes up too often that our job in sexual health usually implies the poor health that we're working with.
Right.
And it's not just clinical health issues, like not getting diseases or not getting pregnant when you're not trying to be, but more so than anything, I think it's attitudinal health.
Oh, yeah.
There's such unhealthy sexual attitudes that's, I think, the cause of all these problems.
Sure. Well, what comes along with that, right? It's the typical sort of social service type of, not even social service, but, even sort of government. The three things, the knowledge, attitudes, and behavior. And if the knowledge is not there, the attitudes get skewed, and the behavior tends to go off the rails.
Yeah, and there's no education about the behavior, so people just go like animals on instinct.
Yeah, exactly, and unfortunately make so much of this stuff up as they go along.
Yeah.
Because we just don't have the knowledge. We don't teach this stuff. Even what passes for sexuality education is at best an organ recital.
Right.
That is usually followed by, if you put a penis in a vagina, you'll get pregnant, or a disease, don't do it, and let's go raise a bag of flour.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that old?
Yeah, sure. I saw something recently, I thought it was dead and gone here, but I saw something that what did they call those, the Baby Think It Over dolls are being used in other countries. Like in the Middle East and in South America, they got kids walking around with these. Remember these computerized dolls that would have this shrill scream that it was timed, that if you didn't feed it every so often, or if you shook it or left it alone, it would scream and then it would record. That would teach
supposed
kids.
To emulate like having a real baby.
Yeah,
but what most of these kids do is if it gets
night.
Annoying, they just stick it in a drawer, let the battery run out, and that doesn't happen with a real baby.
Well, supposedly they get busted for that.
Well, they do, but there's no consequence.
You get an F. Right, you get an F and try raising a kid, you get a screwed up kid on your
You remember
head.
the empathy belly?
Right, sure. Yes.
Right, this harness with these lead balls. I think a total of 30. It's a big belly, and these lead weights, 35 pounds of weights to
so a guy
teach
could
men
feel what it would be like to be pregnant.
Exactly.
The empathy belly.
Yeah.
That was completely
not quite the
ineffective.
same.
Yeah.
Right? I remember even asking guys putting that on. It's like, okay, now do you have to go to the bathroom a lot? Do you feel nauseous? Do you feel ugly and horrible about yourself? You know, where's the real taste of pregnancy?
Now imagine if sexuality education was pleasure focused instead of consequence focused.
You know, you're right, but my first reaction to that is, why do we have to fantasize about that?
Right.
Why do we have to fantasize about sex
so
being
crazy.
pleasure
That's so
centered?
crazy. It's a novel idea.
It
isn't
really
it?
is.
Maybe someday, but how crazy is that?
Yeah,
Really?
it's kind of
the thing that's supposed to make us feel best about being human is relegated to the absolute forbidden bottom of the list things to talk about.
And I think the whole general fallacy that we look at sex and sexuality as something we do rather than something we are.
And something we share with each other.
Right. It's an important part of communication. It's an important part of connection.
So what's the message about how to sexual pleasure? Well, if you're a really good lover with no education and no lessons, then you'll be able to give your partner great orgasms.
Oh, absolutely.
And
partners expecting it. But you know what, that's also...
no understanding about your partner's body or your own.
Right. And I mean, there's a legacy from that. I'm going to go back to Cosmo. I think I said something last time about, you know, how that was this, you know, double-edged sword. It was on the one hand a really good thing for female sexuality in particular, but it quickly became a terrible thing, I think. And one of the things that started telling women not only what kind of orgasms they're supposed to be having, but also the sort of tagline of, if your partner is not giving those to you, go find somebody who will.
Right, you got a bum.
Right? Nowhere in any of that, and even today, another thing that's really lacking is teaching people that orgasm is really, it occurs from the inside out. It is something that we allow ourselves to have.
Right.
If we have one or don't have one, it's not on our partner, it's on us. Now, granted, a lot of it has to do with how we feel being with our partner, how safe, how willing are we to open up and allow this, you know, the sharing of the pleasure. That's really what it's all about. But it's not their fault, and it's not their credit either way, if we have one or we don't have one. But it's ours.
But it's downright comical when you think of the script, the unwritten script, especially the one given to men, who are generally, sorry fellas if I'm selling us out, but you know, generally clueless about female sexuality and how women respond sexually.
Yeah.
The message is just get it up, get it in, move it back and forth, and that's the magic. And that'll do it for you, and it better do it for your partner, otherwise you don't know what you're doing and you're a loser.
Right.
What is he doing this back and forth without any clue? You know, we were talking about this the other day. Guys have no idea what they're doing with oral sex, except they think they're supposed to just imitate what they're doing with their tongue, what they're supposed to do later with their penis. And, you know, maybe a map, some arrows, direction pointing at the clitoris.
It's not that, you know, we haven't been given directions, that we haven't been given something that, you know, uniquely skilled when it comes to oral sex. I mean, how many guys have been told, well, basically just take your tongue around the clitoris and just sort of do the alphabet?
Well, I mean, at least there's an effort to be focused on the woman's pleasure.
Well, I don't think
better than just
writing a letter.
Stick it in until the magic
somebody's genitals
happens.
is paying attention to their pleasure.
A little creative, isn't it? Better than just trying to ram it in there and think just, you know, do it until the magic happens.
You're right. You're right. It's a low bar, but I'll give that to you.
Just starting there, right? Just being other-centered. If I could be sexist, I think it's still safe to say, even if it's sexist, that women are just socialized that way.
Yeah, no, in general, this is a generalization.
Get pleasure from providing pleasure, and men generally are self-centered lovers.
Yeah,
they're getting theirs. They're getting off.
Yeah,
you know, we've been talking a lot about this in classes during the day, trying to get our students to think about just what is good sex and bad sex for a man and for a woman. How is it the same and how is it different?
Yeah,
I was
unfortunately, they're
really
often different.
Trying to find that article, it was so moving and a little upsetting, to be honest. And I couldn't remember
Around the pain.
name or the author. But yeah, just this idea: how many men ever even consider the thought that good sex might just be not painful for once, and how many women endure sex?
Well, even on the most basic level, right? If you ask women in general, you're probably going to get a very significant percentage of women that will say they have had bad sex. Not many men really would say that.
If they've had sex, that's good.
Exactly. For a lot of guys, if they hear yes, it's great.
Yeah.
Right? If they get close to a vagina, it's good sex. So a lot of that...
Unless it gets interrupted. Right? Then, again, guys, sorry if we're selling out all our secrets, but everybody in the world needs to know that there's no such thing as blue balls.
Right.
Right? That this is a play.
Right.
We all understand that sexual tension, like any other tension, seeks to be released, but there's no bad thing that happens if sex, if a guy gets aroused and things start moving
You
and
mean
it gets
things
stopped.
don't back up?
Yeah, right.
And the
they
testicles begin to
and
swell.
They explode.
Yeah.
And they drop like empty clothes. And like Billy Connolly said, they can't get the lid on the coffin. Everybody will know why. And they'll be pointing at her at the funeral. Come on. It's a play. It's a way of saying, hey, baby, look what you did because
That's right.
you're so
You
beautiful.
did this, so you have to take care of it.
Now it's out of my hands.
That's
we
right.
have to have sex now because you don't want me to get the blue balls and
Right,
drop
exactly.
dead on you.
Exactly. You did this to me. You have to be responsible for
Those
it.
feminine wilds
That's
again.
right.
It's always the woman's fault.
And hopefully, guys, we do kind of have to know, even if we don't want to admit it, that what goes up does come down. Right? And just because a guy gets an erection doesn't mean anything has to happen with it. And if nothing happens with it, it just goes down.
Yeah, unless, we're talking about more than 4 hours, like you hear the scary warnings at the
Well,
end
that's a
of the
little bit
Viagra
different.
commercials.
That's a little bit different. A guy's not going to be in the back seat, get turned on by his girlfriend, and get priapism.
Well,
that's usually
maybe
medically related.
He's doing a bunch of cocaine or something.
Well, that's to say,
They
medically
might.
related. It's usually
Right.
some kind of drug.
Even though maybe
behind
women
that.
might want to joke about that. Erections lasting 4 hours. Send them over here.
Right. Yeah. Don't call
guys,
your ex.
You
Don't
need
call
to
your.
know
Go to the
that
doctor.
needs to get to the emergency room pronto.
Yes.
Because just don't forget, blood that's not moving clots.
Well,
And
dies.
We don't want a penis full of clotted blood.
Blood that doesn't move doesn't get oxygen, and it dies.
Yeah.
And you
That
don't
could
want dying
gangrenous
blood in
penis.
that tissue because it gets necrotic.
Oh.
And yeah, I mean, gangrene
yikes.
on the penis is not the best thing in the world to have to deal with.
Yeah. So, how do we teach people about sexual pleasure? I Googled it this afternoon, and it's just ridiculous. You just get nothing but the same old sexist
Yeah.
crap that I don't even know. I didn't bring a list, but what's it really about? Just focusing on the partner. Right, I think when
But I think it's got to be simultaneous. See, I don't
That's
think it
what I
can
was
be
gonna say.
completely
there's a
other
feedback.
oriented.
There's a feedback,
Right.
So many times when couples are struggling with sexual dysfunction in therapy or self-consciousness and worrying about, what they look like or sound like or anything, I'll point this out to a couple. Doesn't her pleasure get you off, or vice versa? And there's always, yes, of course, right? People are, it's like a wow moment that
Right.
they have to realize.
And unfortunately for a lot of people, though, in that moment, right, in the active moment, while they are, being sexual, that's not the thought that they have. The self-consciousness, the worry, the insecurity, it all kind of plays itself out there.
Right.
So
That's bad sex, by the way.
I would agree.
Because people are not connected when they're in their head, when they're watching themselves from the foot of the bed, criticizing themselves or focusing on some part of their body or their other's body.
Right.
That's-
And you said something important, being in their head. Right? That's the disconnect. But we do want them to be in their body.
Right.
We do want them to be
Isn't that
connected
amazing?
and aware. But
Yeah.
not up here, because this is where all that darkness is. This is where all the insecurities are. We want them to be sort of monitoring and mindful and really being able to work that, being aware of your partner at the same time, but not trapped in this. What do I look like? What does
Right.
he do? What am I doing? What does she think of me? What does he think of me? All this self-conscious stuff, and it's a killer.
Yeah. You know, when I was training with Susan Lee when, the late 90s, around 2000, that's when mindfulness became the buzzword in therapy. And everybody was, became this kind of trend that it is now. So there was a contradiction with a lot of sex therapy because we don't want people to be too mindful where they're, spectatoring.
Right, and become obsessive.
Yeah. So you find that sweet spot in between where you can inhabit your body, enough of that letting go, right? That's another important message for women. A lot of women have a difficulty with just that letting go that's necessary for pleasure and orgasm in particular. And attuned to our own pleasure and sharing that, bouncing back and forth with the other.
And speaking of attuned, we've got a caller on the line, I believe William. Hello?
Hello, how are you?
Hey.
Good, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. All right, so I have a question about sex.
Sure.
Well, particularly when sex goes wrong. So I'm a college student, and on college campuses, the topic of sexual assault and rape is really a big deal. And they tell us that 1 in 4, sometimes 1 in 5 women will be sexually assaulted or raped sometime during their undergraduate years at college. Now, to me, this statistic just seems unreasonable because, statistics like that is something you'd expect out of, the Congo or something. And in fact, what I've heard is a lot of the data from the Justice Department and other government agencies, they don't really support that statistic that they read to us. In fact, they find it actually closer to around 1 in 50 or so. That's the number that I hear, or even lower. So basically my question is sexual assault as big of a problem as they're making it? And if so, what force is driving that? Because I know they talk about a lot like rape culture and stuff. And I just kind of find it hard to believe a lot of that.
Okay. And I can understand that, and I really can. And I think the most important thing to understand about that is, if you look at Justice Department statistics, and there's DOJ statistics, there are local law enforcement statistics, all statistics are based on reporting. And one of the biggest things that we're contending with these issues like sexual abuse is that it is grossly underreported.
Yeah.
So when they do a lot of these statistical trend analyses and some of these extrapolations, and when we talk to people, when we have groups of college students and we see people that are saying that they have experienced these things, but they're not reported.
Right.
So there really is a difference between the actual incident and what is reported.
So what would you guess the number at?
Well, it's kind of hard. We've been pretty much operating under the 1 in 5. In some cases, it's been said 1 in 3 women actually, and something like 1 in 5 males.
And now you're saying you heard 1 in 50. I don't know where you heard that from or where that stat is.
Well, I've heard that from like he was saying, like reported cases to the Department of Justice or something.
Right. And remember too that a lot of these things are pretty selectively defined. So that when they describe or define violence, maybe in some cases in that particular reporting trend, it's described or defined as rape. Right. And short of that, doesn't get reported. Just like the other side is true that there are things like, just to give as a reference point, when some people like to talk about the effect of porn, right? And it increases violence toward women, yet to suit their own purposes, they may basically say, if a slap on the butt followed by a "who's your daddy," they call that violent. If there are certain words that are uttered in passion, they would call that violent. So a lot of this stuff is based on how they're gathering the statistics, how they're defining their parameters, and there's not much consistency. But I can say over the course of my career, those numbers of, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 women and those men, they've been pretty consistent.
And I think regardless of the actual numbers, what drives it, you asked about this idea of rape culture. I don't think guys necessarily have this in mind that, let's go out and get drunk and rape somebody. But I think the scripts, the way they're written, the ideas of implied consent or she doesn't really mean it, she's just protecting, so I don't think
that's a big one. That still is a big one.
I don't think she's a slut. so I can ignore those protests because that's part of the game.
Right.
Right? I mean, look at the difference between a serial rapist, the kind of stereotype hiding in the bushes in the park, stranger rapist, and a date rapist.
Right.
The guy taking a woman out, presumably to get to know her better, to grow, some social intercourse maybe before some sexual intercourse. And the script is, I got to make my move. She's going to resist so that I don't think she's easy, and I can ignore that because she's just putting up a show.
I know what she really wants.
Her mouth said yes, but her eyes said yes. That old crap, right?
Right.
It's so old, and yet it's still
But
around.
it's still around because a lot of media, a lot of movies, a lot of television, a lot of depictions of women continue to perpetuate that.
So, like with current events, I think here's an example to go to William's question. People have been talking a lot about, we can't put Aziz Ansari in the same boat as Harvey Weinstein. And I absolutely agree. But there is still something in the message. There's still something in the script about a way of behavior, whether it's expected or guys just think they're just doing, what's part of the script, what's expected of them.
Right.
And that's where the lines get crossed between what's unwanted. Now, of course, the president and people like this are saying that these are just women, with buyer's remorse. They gave consent and then changed their mind. But isn't someone entitled to give consent and then change their mind? We can't have this. Well, you said yes, so tough. Got too out of hand, or it went too far. No, there is not too far. I don't care if a guy's an inch away. If a woman says stop and he doesn't stop, he's a rapist.
Right. And we hear a lot that men have to learn that no means no. Right? I have never met a guy who, when they heard no, said, "What do you mean?"
Yeah.
Right? It's not that we don't know that no means no. The issue is that too many guys, because of that entitlement, because of that sense of they really know what the subplot is underneath all of that, they just don't care. They don't listen to no. It's not that they don't know what it means. It's an easy word.
Yeah.
Right? They just don't honor it. And even, again, when you look at like in Aziz Ansari, I do not put him anywhere near any of that, Harvey Weinstein, even Trump kind of stuff. But we can look at that sort of deeply ingrained coercion when they hear no, and it's then followed by a come on kind of thing. That's coercion.
It is. Yeah.
Right? So, even on that level, it's still kind of there. So, again, going back to this idea of rape culture and abuse culture, it really does stem from that sense of guys getting what they want, or maybe what they deserve. Even if they don't necessarily act on it, there's this sort of attitude and there's energy that still kind of puts it out there. It's intimidating.
It is intimidating. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also been a sexist difference throughout the ages that we can't help but notice that there's a threatening, menacing gesture, right? I think this is why there aren't female flashers. Because it's
if they have female flashers, they throw dollar bills at them.
The idea of a flasher is a threatening, menacing gesture.
Right.
A guy uses his penis as a means to frighten and intimidate.
Right.
And violate, that's a consent thing.
So to wrap this, let me just say that, William, as much really, really appreciate your question, and I think it's a really good one, and it's an important one. But I would also say let's not get caught up in the numbers. They're not as important as seeing that this is a trend. This is something that is there. If it doesn't meet the level of the actual numbers, it doesn't really matter. Because we know that this is happening, and we know that this is the culture that has developed. And so really appreciate your calling in, and thank you. And I think we have another caller on the line.
We do?
We have Bugsy on the line. Bugsy, you there?
Hi, am I on the air?
Hello?
Hi, am I on the air?
Yeah.
You are.
How you doing?
Good. How are you guys this evening?
Doing
great. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, I just want to start by saying, I listen to you guys all the time. I think you guys do such a great job of, providing accurate information and still, providing a humor element, but also, addressing some really important topics, and I just really enjoy the show. So, I'm thankful to be on, and I just want to say I think you guys do like a really, really great job.
Thanks for saying
so much.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
What you thinking about?
My question might be a little off topic, but I felt it necessary. I'll just give you a brief background. So I've been in a stable relationship for 9 years, and I'm incredibly happy. But I do spray tanning. I go to the tanning salon, and instead of going in the tanning booth, I go to the tanning salon and spray tan as of late. And I'm 36, and the girl who works there is about 22, 23. And I say the thing about being happy is because there's really no interest in, I'm also loyal, so there's no interest in getting involved. However, the process is you go down and, you strip down to your boxers, and essentially you have this person spray tanning you who is, on their knees, spraying your legs and then moving up and spraying your arms. And you're basically standing there in your boxers.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess this is where the question is. Before they come in to spray, I get Mr. Happy, kind of, I wouldn't say excited, but let's just say presentable,
fluffed,
if you will, so that, this smoke piece that's spray tanning me is also aware of the fact that we've arrived, if you will.
You have an erection.
I guess my
no, I don't think he's going
Oh,
that
no,
far.
you're talking about ejaculating.
No, you're not. There's nothing in between the lines here. We're not confusing this with like a happy ending massage joint or something. We're not crossing any lines. We're just talking about
this
show.
is a legit spray tan. And mind you, when they spray you, it's cold air mist, so it can get cold in there.
Okay.
So it's essentially more of a, I'm proud of my mistake.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, and I guess, if you're gonna go up on a stage and perform, you want to perform at your highest level. But again, I guess as long as I'm not crossing any boundaries, which I'm certainly not, is this a weird thing? Is it weird for me to want to be, seen as somebody who is capable, if you will?
Right. So you want to know if it's creepy?
Yes. I want to know if I'm a level 4.
Well, for you or for her?
I guess it'd be from her perspective, but more as a generalized thing. Like, am I the first guy that, goes in there with an attitude of like, when this girl sprays me and Mr. Happy goes down to minuscule, I'd prefer that, it's more like, hey, that thing's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Well, there's a line there. I would say. I mean, probably most guys would probably want to. I mean, they're not naked; they're in their underwear,
right?
Right. So
exactly.
It's not like they're on display, but would want to not be their tiniest in a cold room.
Sure.
Right?
Again, you want to impress this woman,
right? But I think there's a line, again, between a kind of a menacing gesture. If a guy's big and is like looking to make a point and show her, then it could be, it could be kind of scary. I'm sure women in that position deal with a lot of this kind of sexual harassment.
Since we're kind of running out of time, let me just throw in.
Is playing.
That's right. Let me just throw in that I think when you're going for your spray tan, that's all you're going there for.
Right.
Just focus on that. Don't worry about impressing her. I'm sure she's seen more than her share. She's probably not easily impressed, and it really doesn't matter because that's not what you're there for.
That's our time for this week. Thanks for calling in.
Thanks for calling.
We'll see you next week and every Monday at 9 o'clock for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Indeed. Have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
Listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week.
The opinions expressed